Thank you very much, everyone. It's really a very special time to be able to come and meet with a group, and I think this Hampton Roads Center for Civic Engagement is wonderful. I think it's a great forum for folks like you who are obviously very enthusiastic and have great interest in transportation issues and the various things that are going on in your community, and I think that's wonderful. And I'm very pleased to be able to present to you this evening some of the things about DRPT, who we are, what we do, and some of the planning initiatives that we have been undertaking over the past several years, and kind of have a sense of where we're going too, in terms of some of the guidelines that we're going to be developing and the work that we hope to pursue in the coming months. And certainly, perhaps we can get back together later, maybe next year sometime, or at a time when we can start to have more discussion about some of the work that we're going to continue to be doing. I think, again, I really enjoy the opportunity to work and to meet with the public, especially when it's not just about a specific study or a specific project, but to really present to you some of the things that are close to DRPT and to get your feedback on that. So tonight we're just going to again talk a little bit about who we are at DRPT, the programs that we have, both state and federal, our statewide planning initiatives, and then I'm going to talk a little more in depth about the Amtrak station area land use analysis. And this is something that it may be. It's very similar to what we think of in terms of transit-oriented development and the same various principles, but applying them to inner-city passenger rail, which we don't typically think of as inner-city passenger rail as being something where you might be able to have the economic development, redevelopment potential, the mixed-use kinds of development happening. Typically, we think of that as being more of like a park and ride, a commuter sort of option. But we're thinking a little differently now, and how we can use that transportation investment and link it to the land use, and really see what kind of joint ventures we can get, and really capture the value of that, both transportation and, again, that land use connection. And then I'll talk a little bit about our multimodal and public space design guidelines and how we can start to organize all the various recommendations that we have, from our bicycle plans, our pedestrian plans, the transit plans, and we have road plans for our automobiles. How do we bring all of these things together? How do we organize them with our limited amount of right-of-way? We know we can't continue to expand the roads. We know we can't continue to build out, and it's just cost prohibitive. And in some places in the urban areas, there just isn't the right-of-way available to make those, to have that expansion occur. So how can we utilize the existing rights-of-way that we have more efficiently and move people? And really, of course, with keeping in mind the level of service that's necessary for the automobile as well, but how can we make all of these things fit and work together? And that's something that we're going to explore at DRPT a little further, but I do have some good examples that I'll present tonight just to kind of show you what our thinking is and to get some feedback from you all. And then we'll talk a little bit, and I just about a week ahead of being able to present the full regional transit vision plan for Hampton Roads. We'll be presenting that information to the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization on Wednesday. Then we'll take it to the HRT board or the commission on Thursday. And then we'll have two public meetings coming up. On November 30th, we'll be at the Peninsula. We'll be at the City Civic Center at Oyster Point Conference Room, and then we'll be on December 1st, we'll be on the south side at the HRT facility in Norfolk, just there on Monticello Avenue. So at that point, we'll be able to present all the recommendations for the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Vision Plan and all the various evaluation criteria that we used and the results of that study and what we're recommending in terms of phasing for those recommendations. And it is a vision plan. It is something that is meant to help this region understand where it can go with a regional rapid transit system, with also the supporting express bus service as well as the local bus service. But really that plan, it does focus quite heavily on the rapid transit investment and the express bus to support it. We know that HRT and the Williamsburg Area Transit Authority, who we've been partnering with in the second phase of the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Vision Plan, they have their comprehensive operations analysis that really looks at the bus system, really looks at that supporting bus infrastructure that the fixed guideway investments have to be able to support itself, to really make that connectivity work and allow the bus system to really do its job to provide that local service. And then the long haul rapid transit investments, that really helps to satisfy taking people those longer distances more efficiently in most cases. So that's where we're going with the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Vision Plan, and it's been I think a great opportunity for us to look at what it means for this region and how it's connecting that kind of an investment with its land use. And we're really focusing strongly on the land use, because if you don't have the appropriate land use, the densities, the mixes of uses and the destinations along those corridors, it doesn't work real well to make that big major capital investment, because that's where your ridership is. That's where people are wanting to go. You're wanting to have your residential areas around those stations. You're wanting in those corridors. And that's where we like to see that kind of supportive land use occurring. So it's been an opportunity for us to say, here are the recommendations that really have been on the table for years. And here's from phase one what we saw as a large vision for rapid transit and the supporting bus service. But now how can it come together? How can we refine that to work as a system? And that's what the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Vision Plan is about. And so I'll be excited to see you all, and hopefully at one of those public meetings to hear your input on that. And hopefully it will be well received. And certainly anybody that has any kinds of questions or comments, good or bad, we certainly want to hear them at that time so that we can react and respond to them appropriately. Because oftentimes, whenever I'm doing my planning, we're here for you, and we're wanting to utilize the public investments that we make as efficiently as we can. And certainly at DRPT, that is what we do. We work with 60 transit systems. We have 55 human service operators, 18 transportation demand management agencies doing carpool, vanpool, telework. We have 14 metropolitan planning organizations, 21 planning district commissions. We have 9 short line railroads, 2 class 1 freight railroads, 2 passenger rail operators, and 133 private, but actually I think that's actually grown up to 138. It is amazing the amount of interest that we have had for teleworking, and the private sector really coming to us saying, how can we make this work? So this is just the private companies that we're working for. So you can imagine all of the employees that are really benefiting from our Telework Virginia program. So it's not just the 133, but it's the 133 public agencies, 138 public agencies that we have right now, and their employees. So I always like to keep that in mind as we talk about it, because it doesn't look like a very impressive number, but honestly it really is when you start to step back and think about it, because those are actually trips that are not being taken in the peak periods. Now there may be those shorter trips happening during the day, but certainly those peak period commuter trips are removed when those employees are actually teleworking. Now, we have numerous grant programs, both on the state side and the federal side. We have our state transit and capital operating assistance that we provide to our transit operators. We have demonstration projects that are right now we're trying to focus on ITS, the Intelligent Transportation Systems, really doing the real-time messaging to the customers, when is the next bus arriving, that sort of thing. We provide technical assistance to our transit operators. We help them with their studies. We help them if they have an issue. We do provide them with that technical assistance to help them through those issues as they arise. We have, again, our TDM, commuter assistance programs. We have our senior transportation program, of course, our telework, and then we have our rail preservation, our rail industrial access, and our rail enhancement programs as well. And again, those are all state-funded programs. On the federal side, of course, we work very closely with the metropolitan planning organizations, the statewide rail and transit planning that we do using federal funding. We have our small urban area programs. We have rural transit. We have the transportation for elderly persons and persons with disability. And, of course, the job access reverse commute program, the New Freedom Program, and the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and of course our passenger rail capital and planning funds that are the federal funding that we have, that we program and we administer. So our major statewide planning initiatives, of course, we have the statewide transit plan, and I'll be showing that to you just to help you to understand from the statewide perspective where are needs, and it's a very, very dynamic set of needs because the Commonwealth is very diverse. Of course, we have Northern Virginia that has a huge need for major transit investment. We have the Urban Crescent, Richmond and Hampton roads that also need major capacity expansion and capital investments. Then we have the rural areas out in the western part of the state, and they need the demand response. They need the human services. They need park and ride lots because they do not have sufficient park and ride lots to meet their carpools. So we have a very diverse set of needs throughout the Commonwealth from a public transportation perspective, and it is quite demanding when you really think about that, especially from the planning perspective and how we tie that to our programs. So we use our planning and we tie that to our programs so that we have a good understanding of where the money is needed and where it can best be utilized. And then, of course, we have the statewide rail plan. It looks at the Commonwealth from the rail perspective. It has both the freight and the passenger rail. Then we have the Commonwealth of Virginia Surface Transportation Plan. And we've been working very proudly with VDOT on developing this surface transportation plan that brings the highway, it brings rail, it brings transit, it brings carpool, vanpool, all into one plan. So we have one plan where all these recommendations reside. Now our next step will be to look at those recommendations, where they're overlapping, and come together and say, well, what is the issue and what set of these recommendations do we really need to make the investment in? So what really makes the best sense to address a particular issue? So we're going to methodically look at the surface transportation plan, the corridors of statewide significance, the major corridors in the Commonwealth, and really understand what the issues are, and then again how we're going to address them from a multimodal perspective. And then, of course, I've already talked a little bit about the multimodal and public space design guidelines and how important we think that will be to really help to provide the guidance to the localities to understand how we can utilize our existing right-of-way in a way that will accommodate most, if not all, of the uses. And not every street, not every corridor is going to be a multimodal corridor. I think we have to bear that in mind. But where it makes sense for it to be designated as a multimodal corridor, certainly we should help to provide some guidance in that direction. So now, as I spoke a minute ago about the statewide public transportation plan, our public transportation plan is really predicated on the population growth. What is the trend in terms of where are we growing? What are the needs going to be out in 2035? And we did this planning process in conjunction with the VTrans 2035. And the VTrans 2035 is the state's transportation plan. It is more of a policy document. It is mandated that it is approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board every 5 years. It was most recently approved last December by the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and it's now moving in there. We're putting together an implementation plan of the VTrans 2035. But from the transit perspective, from the public transportation perspective, we needed to understand and to be able to contribute to the VTrans 2035 in a way that says, here's where the greatest need is going to be, but yet here's where also there's going to be a big demand as well in terms of, again, the carpool, the vanpool, the demand response services. So, of course, as you can imagine, the Northern Virginia area, it's expected to grow 50 to 80%, have a 50 to 80% increase in population by 2035. That's the dark shaded area. And then you can see the lighter shaded area, which encompasses the Richmond and Hampton Roads area, is also expected to see a significant growth in the range of 20 to 50% increase. So we know in these areas there's going to be a need to expand the transit service that we have, make the investments where it's most appropriate to make in terms of the major fixed guideway, like we have the Norfolk Light Rail happening. I know the Virginia Beach extension study is currently underway and in its process. So we need to look very carefully and very strategically about where we need to make those investments for the rapid transit. But we also need to focus on our demand response. And we know we have Traffics in this area that does a good job of getting out and talking about the carpool, vanpool, teleworking, and working with businesses on a daily basis in that regard. So you're very lucky to have great resources here in Hampton Roads area between Traffics and Hampton Roads Transit and Williamsburg Area Transit Authority. You all are very well served to a great degree. And then as the lighter shades, you see the lesser amount of population growth or change that is expected in the Commonwealth. So you can see that in the southwest part of the state, there may not be a huge demand in terms of the population growth, but there's a huge demand in terms of the need for demand response, the carpools, the vanpools, teleworking, again, the park and ride lots. VDOT is currently undergoing a park and ride lot study to do this analysis to understand where the parking lots currently exist, where they're needed, what their condition is in, etc. So they'll be moving forward with that, and that's a great initiative. Now, what you'll see here, hopefully you can see it, is the yellow. Now, this was our gap analysis. This is what said where we looked to say, okay, where do we not have transit service, but where do we think transit service might be able to exist? Maybe there's the characteristics for it to be supported. And so all these areas that you see highlighted in yellow fit that criteria. So, you know, we've gone a great distance in terms of providing a lot of great service throughout the Commonwealth. We still have a long way to go. There's still a lot happening. But we do have 4 new services coming online in some smaller areas that their business community came to them and said, we need to be able to provide public transportation to our employees to have job access and to also have employment access and job access to the employees. So we're starting some new services just for the purpose of economic development. And that's really, I think, where the trend is going to continue to be in the coming years, especially in some of the smaller areas that are just trying to compete and trying to bring in those businesses. Now, the 3 main priorities here, and I won't spend a lot of time on these, but in general, we need to support Virginia's existing transit service, and by supporting it with existing operating assistance. We also need to achieve and maintain Virginia's transit assets in a state of good repair. We know that currently we do have a backlog in the state of good repair for our transit systems in the Commonwealth, and we need to address it. And once we address the backlog, we need to have the ability to maintain the transit fleet and the transit assets that we have in that state of good repair. And then, of course, expand the transit capacity statewide, as we just discussed, and as this map indicates, the map indicated that we really need to be very cognizant and focus the investment strategically in the areas that are going to see the significant population growth, but also be sensitive to the areas that have their specific needs and unique needs as well. And then we need to invest in the major capital projects, as we've talked about. We currently do not have a rail enhancement fund. We do not have a transit enhancement fund that's just set up specifically for transit capital investments, major capital investments. So that's something that we need to be cognizant of as we move forward and as we do a lot of the studies throughout the Commonwealth, especially the urban crescent, Hampton Roads, the Richmond area, we have a major transit planning project happening. Of course, there are numerous major transit planning projects happening in Northern Virginia. So we need to be very careful about, we'll find out which ones are moving forward, which ones really are gonna be the best bang for the public dollar for the Commonwealth to make those investments. And it's a lot of it will come back to the land use for us, just as well as it is with the Federal Transit Administration. How well does the land use support these investments? So that's something that we're certainly thinking about, and we're absolutely cognizant of the limited amount of money that we have to invest in the major capital projects, but we know that there's the need, and it's going to continue to grow, and the demand is going to continue to be there, and DRPT is going to be expected to somehow accommodate as much as we possibly can with our funding resources. So the railroads in the Virginia, of course, we have the 2 Class 1 railroads, Norfolk Southern and CSX Transportation. We have 9 Class 3 short line railroads. And of course, we have the 2 passenger rail systems, Amtrak and the Virginia Railway Express. We have the Amtrak regional passenger rail service that we've just launched, I guess it's been a little over a year ago now, to Lynchburg, and that has been wildly successful. It has just really, the ridership has definitely outpaced the projections. So we're very excited about that, and we're very excited about starting a new train into Staples Mill from DC. So we have that additional service that's currently, that has been implemented. And we're trying to make the investments that are necessary in the Richmond region to bring the train, and we are going to be bringing a train down to Norfolk, which is very exciting. And, tying into the light rail, the tide, and supporting it with the bus service, all of these things are going to be key to the success of that service, but it's also going to be key to how we move around from city to city and in the future. So it's going to be interesting to see how that service is utilized. But I have a feeling it's going to be very well utilized, and I think there's a lot of excitement in the Hampton Roads region for passenger rail. So we're excited to be able to move that project forward. Now, of course, why does DRPT? I've talked a little bit about our transportation planning and our interest in land use. Well, why? Why should DRPT encourage linking these two things? And why should we be involved in it, quite frankly? Why should the state be involved in this transportation and land use planning business? Well, we're not necessarily in the business, but we're certainly a key player. We're certainly interested in how the land use is developing and what the locality's interests are and what their vision is for their land use and in their comprehensive plans, what their zoning will support, that sort of thing. Because what this ultimately does is it improves the multi-modal connectivity. It increases the mobility and the transportation choices. It increases the accessibility to transit options. And it, of course, the land use density supports the necessary ridership, as we talked. There has to be people wanting to ride the service. They need to be able to either live, work, play within a certain distance for that rapid transit system to really work. Same thing for the local bus. You really need to have that kind of level of density to make it sensible to have a local bus service in areas. Now, the station area land uses are obviously important to achieving these goals. So we've worked from the intercity passenger rail, we looked and worked with 6 different communities along the Crescent rail line here. We worked with Carmel Church in Caroline County. We worked with Ashland in Henrico County. We worked with them to look at station area land use plans for a Parham Road, which is a new station, proposed station, not proposed, but it's in their thinking in terms of where would they want to, if they were going to relocate their Staples Mill station, where might they want to do that? And the Parham Road site has emerged, and we did do the land use planning for that site. We did do the land use planning for the Staples Mill station as well. We also looked at Richmond Main Street Station. The City of Richmond has done a great job in terms of their land use and their master planning in the Shockoe Bottom area and around the Main Street Station, and there's a lot of energy, and they have a lot of good supportive land use policies and their comprehensive plan, again, their master plan to support the intercity passenger rail as well as bus service and increased bus service. And then, of course, we worked with Newport News, because that in the downtown area is being considered as, well, we might be able to store the trains overnight. We're ultimately wanting to bring more trains into the peninsula side, and that would be a potential opportunity to overnight some trains. But what might that also mean for land use? How could we potentially reinvest in that downtown? In the downtown of Newport News. Right now, the investment has gone to Oyster Point, and there's good reason for that, and I think that's been great and very successful. But maybe in the future, and we even looked at a 50-year projection, what might that look like? But the port, I was just down at the port last week, and it's amazing to me. There's a lot of workers there that could probably live very happily in that downtown area. It's a beautiful street grid, and if they could just bring some reinvestment into that area, wow, what an opportunity it would be. But we looked and worked with the City of Newport News to develop that station area. Today, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the Parham Road, and I'm going to talk about Ashland, because I think these are they're applicable anywhere. They would be applicable in many areas, even in the Hampton Roads area. But they're unique because the Parham Road is a new site. It's a new station area. It's a new. There isn't a lot of land use activities happening there right now. There's some industrial uses, but really there isn't the density to be able to sustain like a transit-oriented development at this time. So what we did is we looked, and working with the Henrico County, we developed this plan that would establish this vibrant mixed-use district with links to its government center, which is just adjacent to residential areas, to really start to give Henrico County a sense of place. Because right now the government center is kind of out there in their county, but this would really help to link that, really establish that as kind of being the center for Henrico County. And of course it would incorporate some of the sensitivity of the stream and make that into a park and open space system to take advantage of that green space. Now, we understand, too, very clearly that this kind of redevelopment, new development activity isn't going to occur overnight. This is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of focus and frankly, determination on the behalf of the county government to make this happen. So what might they be able to achieve by 2015, just to break it down into something that might be a little more manageable? So what we found is we could probably get about 13% of the overall development that you first saw in terms of what we were recommending. And that would consist of some medium-scale mixed-use center adjacent to the station, a few medium-density residential structures. We have about 100 small lot single-family houses in this particular area. So you can see we're trying to blend what's currently there with redeveloping the area into something that has the higher density, the mixes of use that we would typically see in a transit-oriented development. For 2020, looking a few years out, 37% we think they might be able to achieve. Higher scale, average of 7 stories, so we're talking vertical height, not just just sprawling out, but vertical, bringing up the stories, having that be a mixed-use center. Additional medium scale 3 to 5 story buildings in the mixed-use center. So you can see we're starting to grow upwards to help that density over the time that at this point would be a 2020 horizon. And then in 2030, we will look at the high mixed use, 7 to 10 story, developments with structured parking adjacent to the station, transitioning down to the medium and low scale 3-story with surface parking developments further away from the station. So again, trying to step it down, blend it in to the existing uses so it isn't just this wall of urban sort of style development into what is more considered, suburban or in some cases rural land use. And then have the community center for residents and buffer it with some of the industrial that's currently there that the Henrico County really obviously wants to try to maintain in this area. And then this is just the overall sort of bird's eye view of the Parham Road TOD, and then this is the station area plan. Should zoom in there. And it's kind of neat, but when I see this graphic, I think that's great. And then I think, here's where our guidelines come in. Here's where our multimodal guidelines come in. If they could apply those, and they could say, okay, here's how in this kind of an environment we can have bikes, we can have the buses, we can have pedestrian movement happening, we can have the activities happening, the economic development, the outdoor cafes, the fun things that really make even the younger generations, but even the aging population who doesn't necessarily want to have to drive across town to get their coffee, or even drive down 5 miles to get their coffee. So this is where I see the guidelines that we're going to talk about, how they could be applied, and how ultimately what they could result in. Now, very quickly, because we've already gone through the thought process of having these redevelopment activities, these redevelopment projects, transit-oriented development, and how that could be phased over time. So I just very quickly for Ashland, they're a historic town, and they built up around this station, and they're very proud of that station. They have celebrations for it in the summer, and they really are very, very proud of it. And that little town is very walkable, it's bikeable, it has a great community feel. They have their little markets, and it's something that is it's really to be treasured, in my opinion. And what we have done is we have built on that historic making of this town. But what we've done is we've said, let's try to increase the connectivity with the Randolph-Macon College. Let's work with them to help the movement between the college and the downtown area. We heard that when we met with the college, and we heard that when we met with the town folks. And let's try to have that connectivity work towards that a little better. And so they did that, and what they've done is their 13% design concept was to just have that development adjacent to the station, have that redevelopment occurring, having some mixed scale, mixed use center, a few medium density residential structures. They have some height requirements on their buildings. They don't want to go giant high because clearly they're a historic town, so that wouldn't fit the character of that space. And that's okay, because not all land use and not all station areas have to be the same. They don't all have to be these giant dense mixed use areas. They can be more neighborhood. They can be, a little smaller in terms of the scale and the context of the land use. But what they do need to have is they do need to have the residential. And that's something that we really worked with them on, to understand how they could bring in and attract more people living in their downtown, and how they could have that density and maybe scale up to 5 stories just in a few key spots in the downtown area. But again, don't be so intrusive, and step it down when you're getting closer to the edge, the further out you get away from the station, so that it blends into the land uses appropriately. And then here's the 2030 vision, where you can see we have the higher density redevelopment. We're really, really focusing at this point along England Street, which they are doing a great job at some redevelopment activity along England Street, having some medium scale, 3-story residential, and again, increase that overall connectivity throughout the downtown and into Randolph-Macon College. And when you think about it, in Virginia Beach, and with having the light rail, and how this community might be able to tie into that, and I obviously haven't been as closely involved in that station area planning as maybe I'd like to be, but I will tell you that it's an opportunity. And I'm sure that HRT and Virginia Beach are keeping that in their mind as they move forward with their land use planning. This is just the bird's eye view of the town of Ashland's TOD. This is what it looks like today. Okay, it's a lovely little town, but if they were to implement some of the design guidelines, some of the land use recommendations, this is what it could look like. And again, you can see it is a little higher in terms of the residential building heights, or the building heights that they don't have today, going all the way up to 5 stories. Currently, they have 3 stories. But if it was developed appropriately and within the context, then it could fit very nicely. And that could be an example just anywhere. This is the town of Ashland, but the town of Ashland, there are lots of places that this could apply. So this is just an example. Now, moving into the multimodal and public space design guidelines. This is something, again, that I think is very important, and I think it'll be a very interesting planning process to move towards. We currently have some transit service design guidelines that help to provide some information on what kinds of transit investments are appropriate for different kinds of land uses, so that we're not trying to put in light rail in areas where there just isn't, it's a rural area. Or we're not, we're trying to be sensitive and trying to provide that guidance to the localities from that perspective. But this is going to take it a whole nother level. It's going to really help us to understand how we can accommodate all the various modes, as I've said numerous times in our talk here. But we need to provide the guidance to facilitate the organization of the planning for the bicycle plans, the pedestrian plans, the bus and rapid transit plans, even the intercity passenger rail plans, as we've discussed here tonight, and to provide the implementation and to support that. And to enhance the function and the character of the infrastructure. Really, that's what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to make it more appealing, more and safer in many cases for the pedestrian and for the bicyclist, for those people trying to access transit, and also for the automobile, for the people that are driving, because sometimes they don't see the pedestrians, or they might not see the bicycle coming off the crossroad. So it is safety for all modes. It facilitates the design the facilities will be designed for the joint uses and the connections between 2 or more modes of transportation. That's really what we mean by multimodal transportation. And that includes, again, the bicycling, the walking, the transit, both local bus and rapid transit, rail, passenger and freight. It also means automobiles, and it does include aviation and ports. We work at the state level with all of the various modal agencies now. We talk on a biweekly basis, and we're really coming together to try to understand how we can support each other in the transportation needs that we have. What does aviation need from us? How do we support the ports? We do a lot of work with the ports in the freight world. But I'll tell you, we also need to learn how we get people to and from the ports that are working there just from the transit perspective. But the guidelines are really going to focus on the first 4. It's going to look at the pedestrian, the bicyclist, transit, and rail, more from the passenger rail perspective. And what makes a street multimodal? I think we all, I'm sure you all are very well familiar with this, but just the physical comfort, just being physically comfortable and safe, having that balance in the transportation system, having dedicated or shared signed facilities, a buffer between the conflicting uses, having the adjacent land uses that create the visual interest in the activity, and having the convenient amenities that make it a place where people want to be. That's really, it's about us. It's about what we want, and it's about what our needs are. And how can we get that just from thinking of it from a guidelines perspective. So how do we become multimodal? Well, we start with our vision, and we start with the existing recommendations for the transportation systems. And we're doing that. You're doing that with the high-speed rail. We've done that with intercity passenger rail. We're doing that with the regional transit vision plan. So you have a great vision for this region. And Virginia Beach is very well positioned, being the lovely city that it is and having all the amenity in the ocean front. I mean, you all are in just a wonderful position, in my view, to really go a long way in terms of having all the various transportation modes working together. Because I'm sure you have a lot of people wanting to bike to the ocean front, wanting to walk there safely with their kids, wanting to also get there if they're coming in for vacation and they're traveling in with their family in their cars. So you have a lot of demands on you in this city. And how can we have the street geometrics and the spatial organization of the existing right-of-way, and then paying attention to the details and the character, and all of this. When we do all of these different things, this will lead to the opportunity for the efficient realization of the multimodal corridors throughout the design, the development, redevelopment, and the continual investment. Like we saw with the station area land use planning, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time to get there. So, we have to be this. It's a marathon. It isn't a sprint, as we like to say. And then the typologies. Of course, we have the corridors, the linear corridors, and then we have the districts, the station area, 5-minute, quarter-mile walk area around a particular node, either a transit node or if it was a rapid transit or a bus rapid transit station. And to have the corridors organized into typology, I think, is very important because these consider both the transportation function and the adjacent land use. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to link these multimodal guidelines with the functional classification of the roadway system, so that we're being very sensitive of the context at which we're trying to implement these recommendations, so that we're not trying to put a quiet street on some commuter road, so that we're being sensitive to that. And I think that's necessary because those are the investments that we've made. And, we need to be respectful of that system as well and how well that's functioning. So if we can just have them organized into vehicular-oriented, whether it's a parkway or a boulevard, again, if it's a commuter corridor, a connector, just making those connections into the commuter corridor, could be pedestrian-oriented or having the gateway. Gateways are really big right now in terms of you've arrived to Virginia Beach. That's really, we need to have some sensitivity to that as well. And then, of course, you have your pedestrian-oriented. You have bicycle boulevards. You had Dan Burden here. I'm sure that he probably talked some about the bicycle boulevard and of course, how the walkability is necessary in these pedestrian-oriented areas. And then having your social street and your quiet street. And again, this is where the pedestrian is the priority. Now here's an example. This is an illustration of a multimodal corridor. This is just the urban pedestrian corridor. But just notice how we've been able to establish the parking, on-street parking. We do have some the bus pull-offs. We have bicycle lanes. There's something in here, and I'll be very interested to bicycling enthusiasts about this bicycling box. I'm very curious as to what you think about that, because this is something that I think maybe for the real avid, the real experienced cyclist, maybe they might not be so keen in it, but the more novice person that wants to be able to start commuting, this provides them with the ability on a red light condition to be able to get out in front of the stopped vehicles. They can either go straight, they can make their left turn, they can make the right turn safely through the intersection. And it gives them that safety space. So I'll be curious to get some feedback from you all on that one. But you can see the safe crossings. You can see where the pedestrians are on their pedestrian way, on the sidewalks and the activity centers, how all of these different things can work together. And really that quasi public space where you're entering into those buildings, you're entering into those outdoor cafes. And what does that mean for ADA accessibility? A lot of that is, we don't think about that, but sometimes those cafes do start to intrude on people being able to get through if they have a special need. So this is something that the guidelines can maybe help people to think about. Now this is the urban guideline. Here's the suburban guideline. This is probably what we're most familiar with. The big setbacks, the big streets, people just roaring through. How can we start to calm that down if we want to have the activities happening, if we want to be able to interface a little better with the land uses, with the retail in these shopping centers? So we can add the pedestrian crossings, we can have the bus pull-offs, we can have some design amenities from landscaping just to help buffer the pedestrian. But these are all things that, yes, they do take time, yes, they do take planning, yes, in some cases there is the need for, for reconstruction in some areas. But at the end of the day, you're making it a safer environment, you're making the choice to walk or to bike or to have access to transit more attractive. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about us. It's about us being able to get to where we need to go safely and efficiently. And it's also about us not hitting somebody if we don't see them in the crosswalk. So it's from both perspectives. There's a real benefit to having this kind of an organized outlook on our existing public rights of way. Now here's a street. This is in central Indiana, in Fishers, Indiana, actually, where they looked at their existing right-of-way and they said, we'd really like to do something a little different here because we do have a lot of people that would like to access this from the residential neighborhoods around. And they implemented some of this stuff. I won't say it's just a overnight sensation, or something that they could do just immediately, but they had to work for it, they had to plan for it, and when they had the opportunity to do it, they did do that reconstruction. They did put in the multi-use path. They did make the connectivity into the retail and into some of the commercial development that was already there. And they put in the streetscapes. They made it safe. They gave the some of that buffer, as you see there in the green space, to help the pedestrian not feel like the car's going to run up on the curb. And I'm sure that Dan Burden probably had a lot of good things to talk with you all about for that. So I don't need to belabor it too much. But this is just what we're talking about. Just helping to make the place a little more safe and a little more hospitable to folks. And here's just the cross section of what we're looking at from the guideline perspective and the components, breaking it down. You have your vehicle travel zone, you have a bike zone, you have your bus transit zone or your surface parking or your street parking zone, the separation zone, which is where you have your landscaping, your utilities, your bus shelters, benches, bike lockers, bike racks, those things that are necessary. Then you have your pedestrian way that accommodates the pedestrian. And then you have, of course, your frontal zone or your pedestrian activity zone. And then how that also, as I said, you have your quasi-public space, and you see how that pedestrian activity zone actually does enter into the private space, because there is that connection that also happens, and you need to think about that a little bit as we're developing the guidelines. And here's what it might look like. And of course, this is lots of words on the screen. But this just helps you to understand some real life, or to visualize some real life examples of where the pedestrian way is, where the separation zone is in the upper photo, and how nicely that really helps to protect the pedestrian. Then you have your bicycle zone and your vehicle travel zone. So you can see that we're trying to accommodate quite a bit, and that's a more of a suburban type of a setting, and then the lower setting, that's a little more of an urban environment. But you have good crossing, you have the good demarcation of the markings there on the crossing zone. You have appropriate ADA accessible in the pedestrian way, people trying to access the crossing zone. So you have these things, of course, the signals, the crosswalks. Hopefully they aren't just the push crosswalks, but they're something that are actually integrated into the timing of the signal. So it's built in, and people can know when to expect that advancement of the crosswalk signal. Here's just another very quick example. But I like this one because it shows you how we have the multi-use zone in the upper photo, where you can see that's really accommodating the pedestrians. You have your separation zone, very nicely landscaped. You have your vehicle travel zone, your frontage zone, your pedestrian activity zone. But that's more of a suburban environment. And how they've been able to incorporate all of that. And the lower example is downtown Indianapolis, and that's a very urban area. And there's your separation zone. You can see it's nice and brick. And actually, they do have some landscaping. You don't see it there, but it helps to filter the water, so it does get into the drainage and aspect of the utilities as well. Then you have your pedestrian way. It's a little different. Your frontage zone is a little different. Your your quasi-activity zone is going to be a little different. So you just need to be, it's all in the setting, it's all in the context. But these guidelines are just for that. They're just to help folks, help us to be able to organize all of these recommendations and really to start to think about how we work with the local developer, how we work with our planning and our utility departments, who are all trying to get to the same thing of moving people around one form or another, whether you're on your bike, whether you're in your vehicle, whether you're on the bus. So these are some ways for us to be able to provide guidance to the localities, and hopefully it will be received as such as we move forward in the development of our guidelines. But here's just some examples. Again, you can see the bicycle box, and the bicycle lane, and a nice crossing here. Now here, this is actually in Beech Grove, Indiana. We did the multimodal and public space design guidelines, and we actually applied those guidelines in Beech Grove, and they said, they designated this as a pedestrian corridor. I think it was a commuter corridor, and they did some work with one of their architects, and this is what they came up with. So you can see there, if you look here in the previous photo, a lot of the amenities are there. You can see that you have the person over here walking, running, jogging actually, and there's a park close by. They do have some crossings. You can see that they're trying to accommodate they are accommodating their vehicle. They do have the turn lanes, but just with making this investment in having the green, having the landscaping, having the bike lane, having the safe, obvious crossings that are now safe for them to get from one side of a pretty large road there, pretty busy road, how this can all start to accommodate these various forms of transportation within that right-of-way. So really they're building on what they have, and they're making something more attractive for their citizens in that little community at the city of Beech Grove. I'll just my last slide here. The supportive land use policies are absolutely key. We can't do very much unless we have those policies. So we need to work with our land use zoning. The rezoning language should encourage the inclusion of multimodal facilities in new developments and in redevelopments. Take advantage of those opportunities to incorporate some of these designs, some of these thoughts as you're going through already going through that reconstruction process. And have the multimodal friendly amenities like the landscaping, the reduced building setbacks, bicycle and automobile parking, transit stops and shelters. Develop the multi-jurisdictional vision for a multimodal transportation system. And I think that's where Hampton Roads really is right now. I think you all are really coming together with what your vision is going to be for this region in the coming decades. With your high-speed rail, with intercity passenger rail, light rail, regional vision, your bicycle, your pedestrian. We have the regional greenways that are forming. There's a lot of really great energy here to start to make some of this happen. It's coming together and really thinking about it and having the discussion. It's not always an easy discussion, but usually easy discussions, they're usually worthwhile. And most of the times you can come out with a better result than what you went in with. So I think that's something that we can continue to think about in this region. And again, establish some of the financial and also the non-financial incentives to promote the multimodal improvements and transit-oriented developments, whether it's the fixed guideway or whether it's just bus service, local bus service. because sometimes it's the non-financial, just making it easy for the developers to come in and do this kind of redevelopment. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to cost a lot of money to, to the taxpayer, to, from an incentive perspective, but, just make it easier for them. And that's, I think, goes a long way. I'm not a developer, but from a planning perspective and having worked in a city where we've done a lot of that, that's what I hear from my colleagues that work on the zoning and the ordinance side of the planning world. They say, sometimes it's just making it easy for the developer to come in and have the conversation and sit down and, having this there for them to go by instead of guessing at it, I think goes a long way. So with that, I will thank you all. I appreciate so much your sitting through this and hearing out my presentation, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to present these thoughts to you all. And again, I'll look forward to seeing you at the upcoming public information sessions that we're going to have for the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Vision Plan. And again, that's on Tuesday, November 30th at the City Center at Oyster Point Conference Room. And that's on November 30th. And then on December 1st, which is the Wednesday on the south side, we'll be at the HRT facility in Norfolk at 1500 Monticello Avenue. And that will go from I believe it's from 6 to 8 with a presentation at 6:30. Well, thank you all so much. This has been it's been great. I really do appreciate having the chance to come out. Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.